Logan Marshall Green was one of the last actors we've had on the podcast, and he said that the look of the character is perhaps the first thing he thinks of, and that the character flows from there and inspires him. He likes beards, for example. He likes to, if he senses something about a character that's hidden or furtive, he likes to grow a beard for it. For instance, that's his thing. So your process in terms of creating a character that you just read on the dull whiteness of the page, I mean, you often work with people who allow you a kind of creative freedom to reimagine that character that's just there in stage direction and dialogue that you're able to.
I don't think it's reimagining, though. I really think you have to try to understand the subconsciousness of the writer. That's where I think like I start in terms of where the character is going to come, and a lot of that is it's of course it's detective work, but if you think about how you dream, is that oftentimes you might be the person, you're the only person in your dream. The dream comes from your subconscious. Everybody in the dream is a reflection of you,
of course,
right? Everybody.
Yeah.
So you need to look at a script that way, that everybody's fears or impetuses or concerns are also somewhat a reflection of your characters. So the entirety of the script is the subconscious of the writer, and it's my job to try to interpret that subconsciousness. And there's things that are like, I mean, you'll start finding these things where, for instance, there's like ritual washing of hands, and then water becomes a theme, and what does water mean? And you start finding that their scenes are in places where there is water, and then in the moment when your character realizes the interconnectivity of the whole story, they happen to be in the ocean, and you start to see these, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, isn't that funny? Because like then the production designer has all blue on the wall, and that's the color of water, and all of these things start to kind of come together. And so I think, and there's a woman named Sandra Seacat who really was one of the first people to talk about using your own dreams as a way in which to mine your subconscious or unconscious for finding stuff with your characters. And one of her proteges is a guy named John Marklin, who's been working with some really interesting actors, and that's kind of where we start to build the character, and it allows you a sense of freedom on the day, because you never know what the set's going to be like or who the actors are going to be. You might not have time to rehearse very much. The props are changing, the light's changing, somebody's on their phone while you're, who's supposed to be pulling focus, whatever it might be, right? Because then you're able to be totally open to the world, and the whole world is informing the performance too. I mean, literally, just having another person in a room changes the dynamic. Right. The time of day in which you and I are talking is going to change the conversation. And so to ignore that is to ignore the authenticity of the experience and the interaction, and you don't want to do that. What ends up happening a lot is if you're building from, like, in my opinion, if you're building from the outside in versus the inside out, oftentimes, or at least if they're not united, right, then you start blocking things that don't work for you. And I don't ever want to block anything, because that's when like all the really beautiful things end up happening. I mean, even right now where you're like blocking, right now you're holding your hand up and you're blocking the light on your eyes, for instance. Like that's a part of what could be in a really interesting moment in a performance. And Alexander is basically finding a neutral spine so that you can then find different gears for different characters. If you don't know your neutral spine, it's very hard to then find how, for instance, I'm sure, I don't know your relationship with your dad, but there's somebody in your life that you could probably know who they are just by the way they walk from 100 yards away and in the middle of the night. We all walk and eat differently and hold utensils differently. And that's why you look to animals, because they all do things very specifically. So it gets joyful when you get to these scenes that give you an opportunity to show the physicality of a character, even if it's like how they eat or drink. I mean, I love those sorts of scenes. I'm like, okay, great. This is a wonderful window in which to show the physicality of a character, the animal that one might be using as an inspiration for it. And these are, Alexander is really something from theater. A lot of theater actors have used Alexander and find that really helpful. And then the voice stuff, I mean, I'm talking very quietly to you, but to be comfortable using your lungs and filling a room and volume and knowing that everyone speaks at different pitches and different tones and cadences. It's very hard to play yourself. You know, if everyone could play themselves really well, every producer's kid would be a very famous actor. And there's some wonderful actors who basically play themselves in every role, and I don't begrudge them that at all, because I know how hard that is. But I also know that everybody's very different, and so if you're exploring the craft in a somewhat different way, at least the way I'm trying to explore it, I really want to be able to bring all of the different elements of different people into a character and build the character from those nuances, and it's a lot of fun.